Hello and welcome to Parallel Disney, where we travel the Disney dimensions to discover anomalies so that we can further understand our universe. This time we were allowed to create a temporal loop. This gave us the opportunity to go to the Disney World dimension in 2012. Today we'll be looking for the anomalies of the Snow White attraction that appears across 4 of our dimensions. At Land and World it is known as Snow White's Scary Adventure. In Paris it is Blanche Neige et les Sept Nains, which is a translation for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. At Tokyo, it is just Snow White's Adventure. As you look at the facade of the Snow White's Scary Adventure at Disneyland, you'll notice that the evil queen peers out her window periodically. As you approach the entrance, you'll notice that there's a golden book with a golden apple. If you touch the golden apple, you'll hear the witch cackle. In Disneyland Paris, there's a similar facade with the evil queen looking down on her subjects. However, this time you will not find the golden book nor the golden apple. Tokyo Disneyland and Walt Disneyworld don't have a facade at all, and rather just kind of have a marquee. Once you enter the queue at Disneyland, on your left you'll see a bit of the Evil Queen's dungeon. Inside there's lots of little goodies to look at. The book stand, like how it's a lizard, the gargoyle that's overhead, the book that the Evil Queen uses to poison the apple, and the shadow of her crow cawing. Paris has a dungeon as well, but this time the book has the apple which will illuminate with the skull, as well as a heart box. Unfortunately, the really awesome silhouette of the crow is missing. Oh yeah, and let's not forget that it's on the right side this time instead of the left. Once again, Disney World and Tokyo are lacking. In Disneyland, you'll find yourselves waiting to embark on the ride outside a very well detailed Seven Dwarfs Cottage. In Paris, you'll find a gathering of a bunch of characters from the movie and a rather less impressive version of the Seven Dwarfs Cottage. The beginning at Tokyo actually has quite a bit going on. You have the Queen's Castle, the Seven Dwarfs Cottage, though in miniature form, a delightfully done waterfall, and the Seven Dwarfs Mine. Disney World has a mural which depicts a lot of the characters as well, but this time they're less awkwardly standing all together like a big happy family. You will also get a good look at the Queen's Castle like you do at Tokyo. All the parks have ride vehicles depicting one of the Seven Dwarfs' names. The ride vehicles for Disneyland as well as at Tokyo only have 2 rows, while Paris and Disney World have 3. Alright, starting off at Disneyland, we round the bend, enter the Seven Dwarfs Cottage, where we see some animals, clothes hanging, Snow White standing on a staircase, and the Seven Dwarfs playing a merry tune. Paris at initial glance seems to be nearly identical. However, there's actually quite a staggering bunch of differences. But we'll get to more on that later, because the next rides actually start at a completely different area, and this scene is shared. However, it comes a little bit later, and we'll get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty then. Over at Tokyo, you start out in the garden of the Queen's Castle. You go around the little wishing well. You get a good view of the Seven Dwarfs Cottage off in the distance. Then you make a U-turn, and then, hey, look at that, the Evil Queen is peering down on you like it did at Disneyland and Paris. After that, you enter the castle. Take a look at yourself in the mirror, and you see the transformation of the Evil Queen into the old hag. Disney World starts off much the same as Tokyo. However, you can see that the plants in the castle is a little different as it's painted. And when you round the first bend, you'll notice Snow White sitting on some stairs and the Queen's peering down on her from the castle on the opposite end as at Tokyo. After entering the castle, now you're greeted by the magic mirror instead of just a mirror of, well, a normal mirror. And then we got the same Queen changing into a hag scene. More on this scene later because we'll be seeing it again. Back at Disneyland, as you exit the Dwarf's Cottage, you take a look outside and you see that the Evil Queen was there lingering the entire time. Then you get a distant view of her castle as you enter the Seven Dwarfs' Mine. As you continue down the mine's corridors and enjoy the various jewels that you unfortunately cannot take with you, you'll see a couple of vultures, and then you'll see the entrance of the castle. Back at Paris, we see close to the same thing, but the Queen's head has a little bit of motion on her shoulders. There's some fireflies at the castle scene, but it's a little less detailed. The mine shaft has a bit of a different layout. And this time we have an oncoming minecar that we have to avoid. Alright, going back to Disneyland, we're now at that scene that we've seen at Disney World in Tokyo. And as you can see, it has some little differences. And now let's see the Disneyland Paris offerings. Man, I didn't even recognize that scene. Let's see those again, but in instant replay. As you can see, there's numerous differences, and let's go ahead and take that closer look. Alright, some aspects unique to Paris is that the crow is sitting on a book on a pedestal instead of on a throne. The mirror has signs of the zodiac around it, and the curtains have a star and moon design. Disneyland's experience is enhanced with projection mapping. The curtains are just a dull red. And the throne is not unique, as in it's the same one that they have at Disney World, which has this really awesome peacock design. Disney World's mirror has a completely different border design with a potential hidden Mickey at the top, and the curtains have their own unique crown design. There's also a scepter leaning against the throne. In Tokyo, you will find a complete lack of curtains. The throne has a different design, which has cobras instead of a peacock, and the scepter is at the base on a pillow. Another fun unique aspect is that the Queen here will spin 360 degrees around, while the other one she'll stop and look at you. After we pass the evil Queen when she's turned into the old hag, we get a little stroll through the dungeon, and then we get to see her as she is creating the poison apple. After we pass by, we see the evil Queen approach us from under a bridge in a boat, offering the apple. We see some log crocodiles, a look at various menacing trees in the forest, some bats, and then we start to approach the Seven Dwarfs cabin. At Paris, we get a similar scene, but a little different. A bit more animation on some of the skeletons. Really cool effects on the water fountains. Then we also get to the Queen making the apple. Queen also approaches from under a bridge, offering it. And we make it through the menacing forest once again. A slightly different layout as we see the crocodiles a little later on. And we approach the cabin. As we go into the Tokyo dungeon, we actually see some eyes of creatures blinking. We get to the evil Queen once again, making her apple. And she pops up at us once again. Some of those log crocodiles, and there's this awesome little effect of these flying eyes that isn't found at either of the others. Menacing trees, but this time they look a little more cartoony. And we approach the Seven Dwarfs cabin. At Disney World, as we go through the dungeon, we see a skeleton that moves his jaw. We see the eyes of creatures once again. This time the book is facing us, where the evil Queen is making her apple. We see a huntsman now, as well as Snow White, struggling with the roots of a tree. As we're approaching some of those log crocodiles, the evil queen pops out at us again, but this time it's not from under a bridge and she doesn't have the apple in hand. We see some terrifying trees again. As we go deeper in the forest, we see some mysterious eyes in the shadows. And we start to approach the log cabin of the Seven Dwarfs. Here's a closer look at the scene of the evil witch making the poison apple. It is quite incredible how similar yet entirely different these scenes can be. So one thing standing out, which I've mentioned, is how in Disney World you got the book that's not facing the queen, but gives us the opportunity to take a look at it. All of them have the crow, but as you can see, on World, it's on the right side and on a bookshelf. In Disneyland, you have the crow on top of a cabinet. Another interesting thing is that in Paris and Tokyo, you have the corridor in the background. And conversely, in Land and World, you have a door. Tokyo has really cool shadow effects of the queen and the crow. The cauldron in Tokyo is elevated by a square platform instead of a more circular one like you see in Land in Paris. World, it's hard to tell if it's elevated or not. Everything I found is pretty dark. Also, on the note of the cauldron, it seems that Disneyland has no spillover while all the others do. Also, when taking an even closer look, it seems that Paris is the only one that has fog effects. You can't really tell in this image or the video, but Land in Paris has this neat little effect that your perspective sort of makes a creepy skull shape on the apple. World and Tokyo have some slime on it, but only Tokyo seems to make a notable skull. Oh, and I almost forgot the spider webs in Land in Paris. Oh, and also there are some scrolls on the floor in Tokyo. That's about all the big ones that I think I could find right now. Let me know if you find some other big ones that I missed. I also found the changes here quite fascinating as well. I already mentioned how in World she's still in the forest and she's not coming under a bridge. As well that she's not holding the apple and it is in her basket. But something that's also really interesting is that of all the other baskets, hers is the only one that seems to have a leaf. Land, all the apples are green. Tokyo, they're mostly green, but some have a bit of a reddish color. And Paris, they're all red. Alright, now we're going to pause with Disneyland and Paris as Tokyo and Disney World catch up. Alright, at Tokyo, we now enter the Seven Dwarfs Cottage. Looks familiar, right? We go through it. There are a few little differences. More on that to come. But right now, we're just playing it through. As we exit, we get a good look at the queen, but she's in old hag form since she transformed earlier in this ride, unlike in the others. We get a look at the castle off in the distance. Here's a quick side-by-side. We see the vultures, however they don't have that creepy look to the right. We have a minecar barreling down at us like we did at Paris. And now we approach the evil queen once again, offering the poisonous apple. Disneyland and Paris also have this sequence. However, a door fully opens instead of a half door that already is open. An interesting feature here is how the Disneyland version has a completely different window. Another neat little feature is that the struts on Paris are a completely different design from the others, and that Tokyo's doors opens to a different direction. I know in the video it just kind of looks like you're seeing the evil queen holding an apple, but this is actually a really unique effect that is accomplished by using a concave mirror, and it actually looks kind of like a hologram that you could almost reach out and touch. It's really neat. Back at World, we enter the cottage, but things are a little backwards, as we see the party with the Seven Dwarfs first. Then we make our way into the kitchen, and we see animals looking in horror, and that is because the evil queen is right there giving Snow White the poisoned apple. As we leave the cottage, we see those vultures yet again. Here we approach the old queen in hag form in a menacing thunderstorm. And now we're at the dwarves' mine. And this time there's some dwarves that are by some of the corridors in the mine. Alright, now that everyone's made it to the Seven Dwarfs Cottage, let's take a look at the differences that we can find on the inside. The window behind the trough in World opens outwards, while it's inwards for all the other parks. The clothesline in Tokyo and Paris only have socks, while the one at land has a variety of clothes. In Tokyo, one of the birds holding the clothesline is perched atop the windowsill, while at land in Paris, it's perched on a protrusion on a beam near the ceiling, and at land, that protrusion has a face. The beam crossing the wall near the ceiling in Tokyo has a different pattern as that in Paris and Disneyland. The water pump is in motion at Paris and Tokyo, however, there's a bird on top of the handle in Paris. In Disneyland, there's a bird on top of the handle on top of a towel, but again, no motion, and Disney World also has no motion in the pump as well. In Tokyo, the scroll used in the washboard is in a different position as it is in land in Paris. Also in Tokyo, the animals are making a mess dumping a bunch of water on the floor as they do the dishes. All the shelves have surprisingly different layouts of pots, pans, flower pots, and dishes. World appears to be the only one with a raccoon, and land seems to be the only one with a butter churner. As we briefly look at this scene with the cuckoo clock, we notice that Tokyo's clock has higher contrast. We notice that only Paris and Tokyo have the bird holding a sock. Some more fun detail is that the bird's holding the socks. In Paris, it matches the sock that's sticking out of the drawer below it, while in Tokyo, it doesn't match at all. Land has a chair with a heart in it rather than the face, and Tokyo is missing the owl chair. Paris has a lot of mining equipment around it, and Tokyo also has a much more decorative column on the wall. Oh look, a butter churner turned up at Disney World. In World in Paris, you'll find that the turtle's head bobs a little bit. Tokyo has a stylized silhouette of Snow White. Tokyo must really like their shadows, but I can't blame them. Cool effect. Land appears to have an extra squirrel, World seems to be missing a squirrel, and Paris is missing a rabbit. The party sequence with the Seven Dwarfs seem rather similar, however, the one key difference is that Dopey in World has no flowers, in Paris he's holding flowers in his left hand, and between Paris, Land, and Tokyo, he has a different handful of flowers. Alright, back at Disneyland, we see the Seven Dwarfs scaling a mountain chasing the evil witch. Dopey is afraid with his candle shaking, as a projected thunderstorm is raging in the background. We have the evil queen trying to dump a rock on the dwarves before she is nearly struck by lightning, causing her to fall while we see a lightning flash revealing her silhouette as she goes down the mountain. At the very end, we see a book saying that they lived happily ever after, and we're also greeted with a mural of everyone celebrating. We also have one last look at the evil queen's crow as we leave. Paris is rather similar, however the storm effects are a little toned down. The evil queen doesn't have the silhouette behind her for when getting struck by lightning. But the grand ending, we see the castle in the background with the sun behind it, and we see Prince Charming with Snow White on top of a horse over a bridge, and a few of the dwarves are there as well to say farewell. In Tokyo, we get to the hill climb once again. This time, Dopey is a little bit more brave and his candle is shaking a lot less. There is lightning but no rain, and once again, no evil queen silhouette effects. And it's over? Maybe the evil queen wins in this one? I'm not sure. But hey, we're all into alternate realities here, so yeah. In World, this time Dopey is super brave. His candle isn't shaking at all, which is more than can be said for this guy. There's also a lot fewer dwarves in this scene, and the evil queen, when she nearly gets struck by lightning, she falls backwards, and no silhouette yet again. And here we see Snow White getting kissed by Prince Charming. Also, as the ride wraps up, we see Dopey waving by on the bridge, and we see Snow White on a horse with the prince off in the distance heading towards the castle. Thank you for listening to this presentation of Parallel Disney's Snow White's Scary Adventure. If you enjoyed this and you want more, please consider liking and subscribing. by all means, don't like it if you didn't like it, but if you liked it, like it, please. If there's an attraction out there that you would like to take a closer look at and see the differences of that takes place in multiple dimensions of Disney, please put it in the comments section and I'll be happy to oblige.